I don't even know where I should begin with this. I can promise you one thing, it's not like all the other stories I've heard, but I will admit right here and now that yes, I had to leave Thailand when something happened to me that I wouldn't have wished on my worst enemy. I'm struggling to come to terms with it even today, because I invested my whole life into Thailand. I thought I was doing everything the right way, I thought I was always being careful, and I never considered doing anything that would put me in a bad position in the country. What I'm trying to say is that I was one of those sorts of people who would follow the law to a T, and I would never have considered doing anything if I thought it would give me any problems in my life. That's what makes this whole thing so difficult, and the fact that I had to quite literally leave the country because of things that happened just goes to show that you can never be too careful in Thailand. Things could happen to you in Thailand that you wouldn't even consider as being a remote possibility, and I'm here to tell you that things can indeed happen in Thailand that you couldn't imagine. Before I even begin this, I need to say that no, I didn't get scammed by a bar girl in Thailand. I didn't lose all my money to someone who was a third of my age either, although I will readily admit to being very tempted when I first arrived in Thailand because everything that was so readily available was only a short walk away from the place I was living. What happened to me should be served as a warning to anybody who may consider themselves to be kind and family orientated to the point of doing things that could end up giving themselves problems. Take this as a warning because there are things that you do and there are things that you don't do in Thailand. Unfortunately, I did one of those things that you shouldn't do, and I didn't do it for any other reason than I was just trying to help. I suppose I should say why I even went to Thailand. I don't have a fantastic backstory, but the first time I was there was in 2003 with my ex-wife. She was from Australia, I was from England, and that was a trip that we had to make more times than I care to remember. Most of the time, we flew all in one go, stopping usually 1 or 2 times along the way, but sometimes we made a holiday out of it. One Christmas, we were flying to spend some time with her family in Australia, but we set off a week before we needed to so that we could spend a week in Thailand. Nothing really stands out about that holiday, other than that it was just a nice place to spend a week on a beach. We went to Phuket, and I have since learned that that is one of the sorts of places that you would go to say that you've been to Thailand without actually seeing any of the real parts of the country. We did have a good time. It was an interesting introduction to the country, but it didn't stand out as being a place I thought I would spend a lot of time. The biggest thing that I do remember, unfortunately, was an incident when we got a taxi. The guy tried to overcharge us, considerably overcharge us. I wasn't against paying a little bit of extra money because I was a tourist, but this guy wanted 2,000 baht for a 30-minute journey, and he demanded it. I knew that was so far away from what the price should have been that I refused. He got angry, my wife at the time got flustered, and before we knew it, the police arrived and we did get the price down to 500 baht. It wasn't exactly a great memory of Thailand, to be scammed by a taxi driver, but it's one of those sorts of memories that just sticks with you. Aside from that, it just felt like any other beach holiday that we'd been on. Perhaps the beaches were slightly nicer than the beaches you get in Europe. I'd probably go as far as saying that they were considerably nicer, and perhaps the sea was a little bit warmer. But aside from that, nothing really stood out. I was 43 in 2003, and that's easy for me to remember because I was born in 1960. At the time, I thought I was on a remarkable life path, fully expecting to be retired by the age of 50 with enough money to not want for anything. I wasn't loaded, but I was hoping to retire with enough money to give me an income of £50,000 a year. If I could reach that goal, that would have been enough, and I promised myself very early on I wouldn't be one of those sorts of people who would work himself to an early grave. When I had enough, I had enough. It almost felt, though, with the way things were going, that this was going to come true. As can be the case for many people who have plans, real life can get in the way. When I was 46 in 2006, my then wife decided that she wanted to have an affair with the landlord of the local pub. I don't know what it was that she saw in him, But when I arrived home after a business trip one day, a little bit early, and I saw that, all the carefully laid plans that we had were just that, plans that were not going to come true. As is typical, I got divorced, lost lots of money, and I was looking at retirement in a very different way. With all things being equal, if I continued working the way I was, I would have hit 50 and I might still have been able to retire, but because of everything I'd lost, my income was going to be less than 50% of what I expected it to be. There was nothing I could do about it. The only thing I could do was start looking at different destinations to retire where my money would go a lot further. I wasn't thinking about Thailand because I loved Thailand. Thailand just kept cropping up again and again the more research that I did. And what attracted me to Thailand was basically that I could live there for a lot less than I could in my own country. That was the only reason why Thailand stood out to me. I got over the divorce. It was painful, more so financially than emotionally. And when I did reach 50, the age I always promised myself I would retire, I knew I didn't have enough to live the sort of life I would want to live at home, and I gave myself 6 months to explore a few different countries to see which ones I liked the most. During those 6 months, I spent time in Portugal, Spain, and Greece in Europe, and while I could probably have had a better life there than I could have had in England, it still felt like I wouldn't be living life to the fullest on the amount of money that I had. From there, I spent a bit of time in the Philippines and also Thailand, and it did quickly become clear to me that if I wanted any sort of retirement where I could have a good time, Thailand would be the only place where that would be possible. Of course, I could have lived and survived on what I had in a multitude of different countries, but I didn't want to just survive, I wanted to thrive. I wanted to thrive in retirement, and Thailand felt like it was going to be the best option for that. At the start of 2011, at the age of 50, I got myself a retirement visa in London and flew to Thailand to begin my retirement. As is often the case, I can't have been there a week when one of my investments plummeted in value by 40%, and I panic sold, which meant that when all was said and done, I was still retired, but I was going to be on approximately £15,000 a year. That was such a shocking time in my life because I'd just retired with certain expectations. Something happened like that, and then I'm in a much worse position. But I tried to get over it and understand that I could still live in Thailand, I could be retired, but I would just have to play it cool. I knew pretty much straight away that I didn't want to live in Phuket. Phuket was one of those places that was great if you're a Western couple going on holiday to experience everything that Thailand has to offer, yet it's not really like the rest of Thailand. When I was there for the first few weeks in Bangkok, after I got over the sickening reality of my reduced income, I was starting to be happy that I had retired, finally able to just live without having to perform on a daily basis. Yet the other part of me was a bit uncomfortable with the fact that retirement had to be in Thailand. What I'm trying to say is that I didn't fall in love with the country when I was there, but it gave me something I couldn't have anywhere else, and that was enough for me to put up with the things that I didn't really like so much. It helped me to focus on the things that I did like. What I liked was being able to spend not very much money. That was very important to me now, given what had happened. I could still go and do things most days, I could still socialise sometimes, and occasionally I could do a round of golf, or any other hobbies that I wanted to do. I've heard so many stories where people seem to go crazy when they arrive in Thailand for the first time, almost like once they're there, they've seen something different, and because of that, they think the rules don't apply to them like they do at home. That wasn't me. It's very important for me to say it like it is, because that's what makes what happened to me so unfortunate. If anyone has investments that tank in value, I would say try to be rational about it. I think because I'd arrived and was in the mood for just living, that felt like it was going to thwart my attempts at living. And yes, I did panic sell. I still regret that today. I hadn't decided where I wanted to live yet in Thailand. While I'd done lots of research about different retirement destinations, for example, which countries were best to retire in, I hadn't done much in the way of whereabouts in the country I should retire to. I found myself originally in Bangkok. It is a great city, I'm not trying to say anything negative about Bangkok, but it didn't feel like the sort of place you could live a relaxing retirement. It was just so busy. Just going from your hotel to a mall, if you happen to be the sort of person who likes to go to a mall, I usually just went there to go to the cinema. But by the time you've left your place, you've walked a few hundred meters to the BTS station, you're already dripping with sweat. Then you get on the SkyTrain only to find that there's nowhere to sit and you're jammed in like sardines into the train. When you get off, everyone's rushing around and you can't just walk at your own pace because there are thousands of people everywhere that are in the way. By the time you make it into the mall and are about to start watching a film, you're so worn out from the very act of getting there that you don't enjoy it properly. I get it's a busy city and some people thrive on that kind of environment, but for me it was too much. It wasn't peaceful or relaxing, and that's what I wanted. I don't mind walking to the SkyTrain and getting a bit sticky, but you want to walk up the steps, you want to be able to buy your ticket without standing in a queue for 10 minutes, and then you want to just get on the train, go and sit down and relax, as opposed to feeling like you're constantly struggling all the time. So I think it's obvious that I didn't last in Bangkok. I'm not saying anything against the city though, because it's still a great city, but it's not very conducive to a peaceful retirement. That's the biggest problem with it. I went up north to Chiang Mai and felt that was better than Bangkok, but it still wasn't the sort of place I would want to spend all my time. It probably didn't help that I arrived there in the burning season, and I couldn't even see any of these amazing mountains that people seem to talk about that were apparently a very short distance away from the city. When you're looking at pictures of what it should look like, and you realise how polluted it is, that put me off almost straight away, and I lasted less time in Chiang Mai than I did in Bangkok. I had to go to Pattaya after that because many people seemed to retire there and say it was good, but I was never one for thinking that girls young enough to be my daughter were realistic candidates for a relationship, and as soon as I arrived in Pattaya and had a walk around, I quickly realised that this was nothing close to what I wanted. I'm starting to think that I'm jinxed. Thailand can offer me a lifestyle within the budget that I have, even after my bad luck, yet I don't know where I can actually live, because everywhere seems to have little problems that make me feel like it's not perfect. I was looking for perfect because it was my retirement. I worked hard for it and I felt like I deserved it, and only after speaking to someone in Pattaya about how I was looking for the perfect retirement destination and I'd already tried Bangkok and Chiang Mai and now I've tried Pattaya, when he said go to a little town called Hua Hin and see if you like it there, I was already in a taxi the following day out of Pattaya, hoping that this place would gel with me. It did, almost immediately. It was everything that I was looking for, and on my second day there, I'd already decided that this is where I was going to base myself for retirement. I don't know how you can describe that town other than to say it's got enough Western things so you never feel like you have to go without. Things are priced sensibly so you're not overpaying for things like you would be in Bangkok or Phuket. It's very close to Bangkok if you want to get to the airport for any reason, and it's also by the beach, which for me was a huge benefit. April 2011 was when I rented my first place in Hua Hin. I got a 2-bedroom single-story house about 10 minutes out of the city. I bought myself a Honda CB500 so I could get about, and I started my retirement life in the place where I expected to always stay. They have a great golf course in Hua Hin. I mean, they have more than one, but they had one that I went to, and that was something I tried to do at least once or twice a month. I quickly found some great restaurants that were priced very competitively, which became my regular go-to places, and I started building a small circle of friends who were of a similar age to me and who were at similar positions in their life, just looking for somewhere affordable to retire, where their money would go a lot further than it would in their own home country. Hua Hin, it just suited me perfectly. It had everything I liked about the other places in Thailand that I'd been to, and it also seemed to not have any of the things that I didn't like about the other places in Thailand. And while it didn't seem to be as popular as many places were, and I'm not sure why, it was still a great place. and I felt very fortunate that I was advised to go there by that guy I met in Pattaya, because if he hadn't recommended it as being a possible option, I wouldn't have even thought about Hua Hin. I'd never even heard of it. At this point, I've got my retirement visa, I've got a decent place to live, I've got my bike, and I have enough budget to be able to go out sometimes. And I keep up with the hobbies, like I said, that I wanted to do. My budget couldn't really stretch much further than that. But this was the first point in my life where I felt a sense of calm, like there was nothing that I needed to do in order to continue this existence. All I needed to do was be there, and by being there, I could have this existence, and that was every single thing that I ever wanted. I bet you're probably expecting me to start talking about Soy Bintabat and how I went there against my better judgment to the red light district, walked into a bar, fell in love with a bar girl, and lost all my money. I didn't do that. I can put my hand up and say I didn't go to that street even once because I had no interest in that sort of thing. I will say, though, that I joined a dating site to try to meet locals who were similar to me in terms of interest and background. I had a few girls in their 20s messaging me, and while it was quite tempting, I must admit, I knew that things like that wouldn't turn out well, and I didn't even respond. But when a 46-year-old professional contacted me, I thought that was worth taking things further with. We arranged to meet up, and I let her choose a restaurant, and she chose a normal Thai-style place. And I saw that as a positive thing, because it wasn't like she was trying to get me to spend a lot of money. When we met, her English was okay, and I think her usage of the word professional might have been a bit exaggerated. But while she did work in an office, she wasn't in any sort of managerial role. But I can remember her saying the first time that we met that she was on a salary of about 29,000 baht, which was good for someone like her. I'm using someone like her because those were the words that she used when she was talking about this. Aside from that, I found out that she had 3 kids from a past relationship that had broken down. One of them was already 27 and she was working in Bangkok. The other, 25, her only son, and he was working on the family's farm back up in Korat. Her youngest daughter was 22, just out of university, having studied marketing, and she was working as a sales assistant, having just started a job in Bangkok. I could tell she was very proud of them, and it felt great to be speaking to someone who I felt was on a level playing field with me. I never understood the guys who liked the girls who didn't have anything. I think they expected it to be different than how it was for them because they were paying for everything. I think they thought that it was going to be more like a boss-employee sort of relationship, but that wasn't something that I was looking for. It was a great first date. I was 50 years old, so I wasn't thinking about anything other than getting to know her. And because it was a Wednesday when we had this date, we agreed that we would meet up another time on Saturday for another date, and then we would be able to see how that one went. Saturday rolls around and we meet up again, this time at a place of my choice. For anyone who knows about Hua Hin and the certain controversies that happen there with regard to restaurants built over the ocean right in the heart of the city. All those restaurants and buildings around there are built illegally, but even today they're still there. I think you know what I'm talking about if you know that particular city, and that's where we met up for our second date. It wasn't too far away from the Hilton Hotel. We had a great seafood feast, and I need to say just how crazy it was how much things cost there. While it was still over 2,000 baht for the whole meal, including some drinks, how much would that have been back in Europe? At least 3 times the price, I bet. But during that date, I felt like I did get to know her a little better, and I was starting to think about the possibility of taking this relationship further. I didn't want to rush, though, and I wanted to move at the right pace. And the pace that she was comfortable with, that was important. After we finished the meal, I was just about to say goodbye and ask if she would like to meet up again, but she was the one who asked if I'd like to go out for a drink. Of course, I wanted to go out for a drink, and she took me to a place about 10 minutes away from there. This place was just a normal Thai-style one that you more commonly see in the less touristy areas, where big beers are only 80 baht for a big bottle. Considerably different than the beers in places where expats and tourists would normally go. We just sat there and talked for hours about our lives. She was talking about her children and what had happened with her ex. And I found out that he met someone a lot younger than her and paid her out so that she would divorce him. And then he got married to her and had another child with this incredibly beautiful Thai girl, as she put it. I think that's interesting to talk about because it's not only foreign guys that go to Thailand to meet younger girls, not at all. If you're Thai and you're a guy and you're wealthy, you have the possibility to do things like that. And that's what he did to her. She went on to talk about how that was how she got her house in Hua Hin completely paid for, and he also paid for her children to go to university. I went on to talk about my own family and how I got divorced and my retirement plans and how they changed considerably and how my investment tanked and now I have an income, but it's not as much as it should have been. But I'm okay to live and I can exist. Then she made some kind of reference saying that this must be fate, and she even said that she thought we were meant to be together. I'd already decided that if I was doing any dating in Thailand, I wouldn't be the one instigating anything. I always felt like I had really good self-control, and I'm not going to pretend that I was never tempted with everything that you could do in Thailand, but I most definitely was Mr. Sensible. I was a person who would show interest, yet not show over-interest. I think I was just so jaded about what happened to me in my marriage that I wasn't about to do anything that would see me failing again. I'm saying this because I'd had 2 big beers, and I had 1 big beer at the restaurant, and I was starting to feel quite drunk. Laugh at me all you want, because I suppose you could call me a lightweight. But I wasn't drunk, so I'd rather be a lightweight than a drunk, I think. She seemed to take her alcohol better than I did, and I think she could tell that I was getting a bit drunk, but I would have had another beer if she said, "Let's have another." But she just said, "Why don't you come back to my place?" Everything fit into the rules that I'd already told myself, so I just said okay. I'd met her at that restaurant by going in a taxi, and assumed that she'd done the same. But we arrived at the same bar and she tells me to wait here, and she'll be 10 minutes. I just thought, oh, here we go. She's just going to leave me and it's going to be an amusing situation, and then I'll end up having to walk all the way home. But no, 10 minutes later she arrives on a motorcycle that she was driving with no helmet on. It was quite apparent that she was drunk, and she just said, "Get on." This was one of those small scooters that they have in Thailand. I'm not sure which brand it was. It was automatic, 100cc or something along those lines. And while I wouldn't have normally done something so irresponsible, I just jumped on the back and hoped for the best. She was driving quite erratically, looking at me and smiling all the time, and I'm saying, "Slow down, be careful," because this was insane. Back in England, if you did something like that, you'd be locked up, and I was terrified about her crashing or about getting pulled over by the police. As we were driving along, she was just laughing at me for being so concerned. And while I had heard about and knew that in Thailand people did this quite regularly, and it wasn't as big a problem as it was in my country, I was still very uncomfortable about this situation. Then, would you believe it, in the distance there was a police roadblock. You probably know in Thailand that they have roadblocks where police will check for licenses and make sure you're wearing helmets and everything along those lines. And of course, she didn't have a helmet on, I didn't have a helmet on, and we're both drunk. I'm absolutely bricking it, for a lack of a polite term, and she just says no problem. We get pulled over as everyone else who didn't have helmets on was also getting pulled over. She shows them her license and she's acting like she's really drunk. I'm just standing there thinking that I'm going to be deported. I'm going to get deported from the country, and it's going to be seen on the news back at home, and I'm done. But 2 minutes later, she just says, "Get on." They didn't even check if she was drunk or not. It didn't seem to matter to them. All they were doing was checking for helmets and licenses. And she got away with nothing but a 500 baht fine. I saw the funny side of it after we set off again, but that's one of those things that makes you realise that Thailand is a very different animal to Europe or America or Australia or anywhere really. It's a different beast altogether. Up until then, I hadn't realised just how different things in Thailand were. I'm not one of those people who say that that's a good thing. I'm not trying to glorify the fact that she was drink driving with no helmet on and she only paid a 500 baht fine and that was it. I'm not trying to say that that's good. I'm just trying to say that events like that, they flip a switch in your mind to tell you what Thailand is actually like in comparison to places that you're more used to. That was a huge adrenaline rush. And we arrive at her place, and I felt like I was a child again, back at home that used to do garden hopping, as we like to call it in the UK. You would basically, should I even be saying this, I don't know, but you would run through people's gardens and jump over the fences and hedges and you'd knock on their door and run away. I can't imagine doing that in the US because you'd get shot, but in the UK I did that more than a few times, and that was the first time since I did that where I had a similar feeling, and it was very interesting. We arrived at her place feeling like I had just outrun the police on some kind of chase, and that's what Thailand can do to you. Like I was saying, I'm not saying this is good or bad, I'm just saying that this was an experience that opened my mind so much more to Thailand in a way like no other experience could. For some people, I get that would be too much for them. But for me, I just thought, wow, I'm never doing that again. But I also felt thankful that it had happened to me because it made me understand Thailand so much better than I did before. I was quite shocked at just how nice her house was. It was a 2-story, 4-bedroom detached house, and she said again that she got it when she divorced her husband. He gave her the money so that she could divorce him, basically, and she went on to say that he doesn't speak to his kids anymore, he never sees them, and when they got divorced, it was as if he paid her so that he didn't need to have anything to do with them ever again. I could tell she was quite proud of the house that she had, and we walked inside. She told me to take a seat on the sofa. She turned on the air conditioning and the TV and said she'd be back soon. 5 minutes later, she arrived back with some more beer, and we talked for 5 or 6 hours, and that was the drunkest I'd ever been in my life, let alone in Thailand, and I passed out on her sofa and woke up the following morning. I didn't know where I was when I woke up, and I nearly had a complete meltdown, thinking I'd gone on some kind of drunken rampage and accidentally broken into someone's house, and I was just looking for the nearest exit when she walked in asking if I was okay. She was definitely able to hold her drink better than I could. I had such a bad hangover though that I didn't even want to stand up. Luckily, however, it was a Sunday, so she didn't need to go to work and she just went to get a blanket and said sleep it off. I drank 2 pints of water, took 3 Tylenol and went back to sleep, and I did feel better when I woke up about 6 hours later, around 4 p.m. From there, we went out for a meal that night and I stayed off the drink and she invited me back to her place again, and that's when the relationship seemed to get more serious. One thing I will tell you, if you're getting into a relationship in Thailand, it might be a good idea, now I'm just saying, to find someone who you have something in common with, who's a similar age to you, and who is at a similar position in their life to you. Because what started out as a few dates turned into a more serious dates, and then really serious dates. And then about 6 months later, I found myself in her hometown of Korat, because we're there to get married. Let me just list a few things here so I can get them out of the way right now. No, I didn't pay any money to her family. Yes, I paid for the wedding, but she also contributed some money as well. No, I didn't build a house for anyone. No, I didn't invest in some harebrained scheme that a random family member brought to me. I didn't do anything like that. We were just getting married in a ceremony in her village because she wanted to have that tradition and I wanted to show respect for her culture. That just so happened to be the first time I was introduced to her children as well, all 3 of them, and they seemed to be really great people. Her eldest child spoke perfect English, I mean perfect, as in if you closed your eyes you couldn't tell she was Thai, and you don't get that many times in Thailand. Her middle child was the one who worked on the farm and he didn't speak any English whatsoever, and he seemed to be quite different in the sense that he was very disappointed about what had happened with his father, who was quite wealthy, and I think he actually resented the fact that he didn't have anything really, and that he couldn't get anything out of his father because, as she put it to me, he'd already paid her and the children out, whatever that meant. Her youngest was the eccentric one, I would say, just finished university and she got a job. Something to do with sales assistants, and she was paid okay, but not a lot. It was still better than many people would get. She always, though, seemed to have the latest gadgets, she seemed to have the nicest makeup on, and it made me wonder what she was actually doing for money, but that was none of my business. My wife's parents were both pushing 80, and you couldn't have met nicer people. I mean, they were so friendly and kind and just normal. The experience that I had getting married in the village was so different from the experiences I've heard other guys talk about when they got married in a village. And I want to ask a question to any of you guys who are 65 and who up to a Thai village to get married to a 25-year-old. How do you think the family is going to feel about that situation? Imagine if the roles were reversed, and you're there, sat in England with your wife, who's the same age as you. You're living in less than ideal conditions. I wouldn't call it poverty, because they always had decent food on the table and always had money to pay bills and things, so they weren't poverty-stricken. But imagine you're in that position, and you've got your daughter that you love more than anything in the world. That daughter leaves wherever it is in England that you're from, let's call it Blackpool, and she leaves to go to work in the bars of London, if such bars existed. And a striking 65-year-old man from Thailand shows up and falls in love with her. How would you feel if your daughter brought that man home? Think about it. It's not that difficult to think. I'm just trying to dispel the myth that families in Thailand are out to get your money. They're not. Unless it's obvious why they might be trying to get money out of you. And I think that's a fantastic example of that. It was one of the best experiences I'd had, getting married in her village, meeting her family, and being welcomed into the family. I was welcomed into the family, and there's nothing anyone can say to deny that. I know they weren't wealthy, but they were just down to earth, kind, and pleasant, and it was such a breath of fresh air from families I'd seen in England, who were the exact opposite of that. I can't believe that I've been so fortunate to have met someone who was now my wife. She's still working, by the way, going into the office every single day and coming back late. We did discuss a few times that perhaps she could stop working because she was getting quite stressed out a lot, and I thought if we spent more time together that would be better for both of us. I guess I probably had about 60,000 baht a month in income at this point, and we're living in her house, which meant I could give up my place, and this was around 2012. The good thing about living at her house was that there was nothing to pay, so my income could stretch even further. I could tell that she was happy when we got married, but I could also tell that she still had lots of hopes and dreams that she expected to happen from her previous marriage. She went on to talk about how they got married young, had children, and then he came into some money, and let's just leave it at that. That changed him and made him want someone younger, so she and the children didn't really benefit from that apart from her house and the university for the children. The reason she kept saying that is because she wanted me to understand that she was just happy to have someone who loved and respected her for being her, and I think that's what the most important thing was for her. It wasn't like she was trying to get anything out of me. It was just that she wanted someone to grow old together with, and I wanted to be that person for her. Over the next 3 years, life went by brilliantly. My income was just about enough for us to live on, to live a reasonable life, and still give us a chance to go away sometimes, and it still gave me a chance to play golf occasionally, and we could go out occasionally as well. I was happy to have found someone and a country that allowed me to do that. It's not like I was living my exact retirement dream that I expected to live. I expected to be living far better than that. But this was the best that I could have, and I was happy with it because it was still better than so many people would have been able to have. I was starting to feel like an actual member of her family as well when we went to visit, and I do think that moving to Thailand for retirement was a fantastic decision. I'm glad that I made the decision, and I wouldn't have wanted to change it. But then, things started to go wrong, and I mean very wrong, around the end of 2015, and it wasn't anything to do with me or my wife. Her youngest daughter sprung it upon us, completely out of nowhere, that she had racked up some serious debts with a series of loan sharks, and it got to the point where things could turn nasty very quickly if the money wasn't paid back. As you can rightly imagine, this sent my wife into panic mode. When she called us and told us about the situation, my wife broke down in tears because the thought of her daughter owing a little bit of money to people like that scared her. We told her to come down to talk to us about it and give us some more information because, of course, we wanted to be able to help her out. I will admit to lending her money in the past, sometimes 15 or 20,000, but she always paid me back, every single time. And my wife lent money to her as well, although I think she didn't pay my wife back. My wife was on the edge for the whole day, waiting for her daughter to arrive, and when she showed up and came into the house and sat down, we could definitely tell that it was actually a lot worse than we expected it to be. She opened up to us completely because she didn't really have a choice. And she was working with her job, which paid $20,000 a month, and she was doing work online as well, although she didn't say what it was she was doing. And initially, she had borrowed money from these loan sharks in order to set up the business that she wanted to do. She went on to explain that she'd been borrowing money ever since, using one loan to pay off the other, and now it had become completely unmanageable and, get this, she owed 620,000 baht. And this was to 7 different loan sharks. My wife nearly had a heart attack when she said that, because there was nothing about her that appeared like she would get herself into a position so bad. She was always posting on social media about going out at night with her friends, about how she was going to have nice meals, and it became quite clear that she got quite addicted to having plastic surgery done as well. I could never see why girls felt they needed to do plastic surgery, because natural is always better. Unless there's some form of deformity or if you're in some kind of accident, then there's no need to do plastic surgery. But this was something that she was very keen on spending money on. The problem now was that she was having to pay something crazy like 10,000 baht a day in interest just to maintain these loans, and it had come to the point where she could no longer manage it. I was the one who asked her how she was able to pay anything at all on her meagre salary, and she was very evasive. But when I, together with her mother, spent time looking through her social media accounts, it was quite clear that she spent time in the company of people who perhaps were not real boyfriends. But it's Thailand, and you know what I mean. Even with her doing this, it had got to the point where she couldn't get anywhere close to the money to pay back these loans. Who else in the family could help? I immediately suggested her father. He should be able to help because he had a lot of money, but it was clear that I had everything wrong. As far as her father was concerned, he'd already got out of the marriage to my wife, he'd already paid for their universities, and he didn't want anything else to do with them. It was quite shocking, as far as I was concerned, because it appeared like nothing could be done about it. My wife didn't have any money really, maybe she had 50,000 baht in the bank or something like that. Her older sister was doing quite well and had a bit of money, but she'd just bought a new place to live in and didn't have any liquid cash available. And her brother, who lived on the farm, he didn't have anything either. My wife's mother and father had a lot of land, but that land was going to be split 7 ways between my wife and her 6 siblings. All I had was my investments, which were paying me 60,000 a month, and if I helped her pay that off, that would have reduced my income by quite a lot and would have made things worse for me. My wife suggested taking out a mortgage on her house, but even still that would have needed to have been paid back, and that would have just added to the monthly burden over the next however many years it would take to pay it off. It was a very difficult situation, and it seemed like the only thing that we could do was for me to dip into my investments in order to be able to help her. Her daughter actually seemed to be quite nonchalant about it, as if it wasn't as bad as it actually was, and all she needed to do was pay this money back and she could get back on her feet. It was as if she didn't understand the gravity of the situation, because if you borrow money from people like that, they're not going to think twice about doing anything to get the money back from you, or other things if they're not able to. She seemed completely oblivious to the stress that this was causing her mother, and by extension, me, and also the other people in the family. That evening, I had a very long conversation with my wife about it, and it really did seem like the only thing to do would be for me to pay these loans back so that she could start again and move forward with her life, as opposed to being on the run forever, which I did suggest could be another alternative. Her daughter had already left for Bangkok when we came to the decision to help her, so we thought it would be best to go to Bangkok ourselves and pay off the loans for her directly, so that we could make sure that she actually did that and she didn't try to keep any of the money for herself. And when we told her, she agreed. The following morning, we drove to Bangkok, met up with her daughter, and she contacted all these loan sharks. There were some really dodgy characters that I wouldn't have gone near by choice, and each one of these loan sharks was paid off and all her debts were settled. I'd had to take about £15,000 out of my investments. That gave me an immediate cut of income, but it was only a small amount. I mean, it was still something, but it was for the greater good of the family. So I was prepared to accept it, and my wife knew what it meant as well. As far as we were concerned, after we did that, that was the end of the matter. A problem, an expensive problem, but it was now fixed and we could get back to our lives. That's what we hoped was going to happen, and if I'm being honest, that's what I expected to happen. I wouldn't have thought anything else would happen on top of this, and my wife also didn't think anything would happen. Just to be clear, this is why I felt it's so important to give you all the information about how I met my wife, the things we did together, and the fact that she owns her own house, the fact that she had a job, because I know looking at things from the outside, how every little thing can seem like some kind of setup. I can promise you that my wife was not in on this situation. She had no need to be in on this situation, and she had no need to scam me. We thought it was all out of the way, and the months went by, and I think it was probably just over a year later when we were out one Saturday evening having a meal. We were actually at that place, that seafood place that was built over the water, and she gets a call from her eldest daughter. It was immediately apparent that something was very wrong, and when her eldest informed us that her youngest, who we'd already helped out, had borrowed money again and she was having difficulties yet again, my wife broke down in tears because she couldn't believe that her daughter would do something so stupid. What made it worse, though, was the fact that now she owed 1.2 million baht. And that was a problem because that amount of money would seriously affect our lifestyle and the things we could do. And it would also mean that if things went wrong in the future, or if we needed any money for an emergency, we'd be short. It seemed to be just too much money to actually hand over when we heard the figure. We tried to call her youngest daughter to find out, but she didn't answer. So we went home that evening after not eating all the meal, and first thing on Sunday we drove to Bangkok to go to see her. We arrived at her place and she wasn't there, so we had a look at her social media, and 10 minutes before we arrived she was posting about being in a nice restaurant in the mall the following day, and judging by the restaurant, it was about 2,000 baht. She was posting all kinds of things, indicating that there wasn't anything going wrong. All we could do was wait for her to come back, and when she saw us, you could tell that she was a bit shaken. She admitted that she was in trouble yet again, but she didn't expect to get to that level of debt. We tried to ask her repeatedly what she was doing with all the money. We found out that she had developed an addiction to gambling online. She was borrowing money to gamble, and she was losing, and she felt like the only thing she could do was to try to keep up appearances with her friend circle just to show them that there was nothing wrong. But there was something very wrong. She owed 1.2 million baht, and considering she only earned 20,000 baht a month at her job, that was an awful situation to be in. She actually, though, seemed quite angry that we were worried. My wife was extremely worried, and she just said she was going to go back to her inn to relax because she couldn't take all this stress and pressure that her daughter was putting her under. I agreed to stay to try to help, and I would go back to see my wife when things were arranged. My wife, she just walked out. She took the car, and she headed out. Didn't really say goodbye or anything, and I was worrying about her because this was really not a good thing. I was still there with her daughter trying to actually get to the bottom of this to see what I could do to potentially help, and then there's a knock at the door. Her eyes widened as if she knew what it meant, but she didn't want to go and answer it. They knock again, this time even louder, but I don't know why, so I stood up and I went to open the door and there were 2 Thai guys there. They didn't speak even a word of English, but they kept saying her name and something to do with money, and I just played ignorant, saying I don't know anything about what you're talking about. The thing that scared me the most was when they turned to leave, one of the guys who had a blazer on turned around and the blazer flipped back a bit, and you could see that he had a gun. That was the first time I understood just how many guns there were in Thailand, because before I had no idea that they had such a big gun culture there. I'm thinking she owes money to guys carrying guns, and this is not a good situation. But I'm also thinking if I gave her 1.2 million baht, that's going to seriously affect my life. She keeps telling me to go. She does speak quite good English, so we can speak together, but she just keeps telling me to go. And I don't want to go because I know that things could turn out bad for her, and because I want to help her in some way. The thing is, I wanted really to help my wife, but I don't know what I can do. But I really do feel like I need to do something. So, I don't know, it was so hard. I didn't want my wife to be upset and stressed and worried. I was speaking to her for hour after hour because I wanted her to give me a full and clear picture of what the truth actually was. Like, okay, you're gambling, that's not great, but what else is going on? That was when she admitted that it was actually 1.4 million she owed, not 1.2. I wasn't even thinking that there was more money. I was just thinking she wasn't telling me the whole picture, but no, she owed 1.4 million baht. And that was just too much for me to give. I felt like I wasn't really getting anywhere, so I had no choice but to leave. But before I did go, she said, "Can you give me 20,000 baht now so I can pay the interest?" And I didn't have any choice. I had to give her the money. I then left and got a taxi down to Hua Hin, and my wife was sitting at the house crying because she didn't know what to do. I told my wife how difficult the situation was in terms of my finances. If I was to withdraw that from my investments, even after what I'd already withdrawn, we would be talking about our income going from 60,000 a month to potentially 45,000 a month or less. That would have made a very big difference to us. And my wife understands that and doesn't want us to have to do that, but also there was no other option that we could actually think about to help her. At the end of the day, though, that was the only thing that I would be able to do to make the problem go away. So the following day, I withdrew more of my investments, sent it to Thailand, and the day after we went back to Bangkok to pay off her loans again. They were paid off on the condition that she would seek professional help and never do it again. Having such a big hit, though, to my income was devastating for me and my wife, but the alternative was something very bad happening to her daughter, and we just couldn't let that happen. So I stomached the loss, I helped her out, and I even gave her a little bit more money to seek some help so she wouldn't do it again, because if she did it again, it wouldn't ever end and there would be nothing that I could do for her from there. I'd already sacrificed my retirement for her, and I wasn't about to do that any more than I needed to do. Over the next 6 months, we're not really having a very good time anymore because the money that I have left in terms of the income it provides, it's not really enough. I was getting about 47,000 baht, and while we didn't have rent to pay because my wife owned the house, after I'd paid for all the essentials that I had no choice to pay for, such as my insurance, making sure I had my visa, the utility bills, the internet, the phone packages, after I'd paid for everything, there wasn't really enough money to be able to have a good time regularly. When you're doing your shopping in Lotus, and instead of buying everything that you actually want, you walk past the steak aisle thinking, "I'll treat myself to a steak next month instead." That's when you realize that your retirement hasn't turned out the right way. When I think about her daughter and the things she did, it really does upset me to think that I was the one who had to step in and help out. I mean, my wife didn't expect me to, and she talked about mortgaging the house, but if we did mortgage the house, okay, the income would be about the same, but we'd be paying back about the same out of that, so we'd be getting less anyway, and it wouldn't have made any difference. I am still happy though to be in Thailand. I am still happy that things are going okay in the sense that we can live, but I'm not having as good a time. I think that's what the most tragic thing was, as if bad things come in threes. It did for me, and I will admit it was a mistake, a big mistake. I reinvested what I had left into something that was a little bit more risky than hopefully would have given me a better return. But after those 6 months, when things seemed to be going okay, the investment tanked by 15%, and I didn't panic sell like I did before. But what happened was the income dried up even more, and now it was going to be under 40,000 if things went worse. And then my insurance is due, and then the car breaks down, and all these things are happening all at once, and I had to take little bits of other money out of my investments to cover certain bills. After living like that for 6 months, that was when I realised that I didn't have enough money to continue this life. It was very difficult to come to terms with that, because in terms of my relationship with my wife, we were both good together, but I needed to leave Thailand quickly to prevent me losing any more of these investments. I needed to get some more money and then come back to Thailand as soon as I could. I visited Thailand every year to visit my wife, 1 month a year for the following years until COVID came and I couldn't go. I spoke to my wife every single day multiple times when we weren't together, and I'm happy that I'm back in Thailand now, living with my wife and life is good again, and I'm getting about 70,000 baht a month in income, which is enough for us to live our lives properly. It was a very difficult situation and a very difficult time and very difficult for me to come to terms with everything that happened. Because if I hadn't helped her daughter out, I could have stayed in Thailand forever and I could have avoided working for quite a lot more years. But the decision was made in the moment and I can't change it. But when I knew that I couldn't make it work, I didn't hesitate. I didn't ponder on it. I didn't try to make it work and get deeper into the hole. I made a decision that hurt me and hurt my wife considerably. But my wife has always remained faithful. She even got another job to help save up for retirement as well, so she was working when I was working, and we built something together based on a mutual understanding and a mutual respect, and a mutual love for each other. I'm still very happy to be living with her today. And the reason why I think this is very important is because in Thailand, there is a legal interest rate. I think it's somewhere around 15% if I'm not mistaken, and banks aren't allowed to charge more than that. Maybe there are extra fees on top, but still, it's not really much more than that. It's illegal to charge such ridiculous interest rates on loans, but it's unenforced. And the people who lend that money are the sort of people who aren't going to think twice about doing what it takes to get the money back. And things like this ruin families in Thailand on a daily basis. Maybe even on an hourly basis, somebody and some family is being ruined because of loan sharking. It ruined my life for a lot of years because I had to step in to help. At the time, it felt like it was the only thing to do, and we got to the point where it looked like it could have just about worked. And then I make bad investments and other mistakes, and that caused me to have to leave. Be very careful if you're in Thailand and you meet or know someone who has a tendency to get into debt or to gamble, which is also illegal in Thailand at the moment. Be very careful because it ruined me. I'm just lucky that now I'm back on my feet with my wife, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.